Hi, Jen.
Hi, Rob. We need to look at this project we're doing together in forensic linguistics.
Sure. The first thing we have to do is define forensic linguistics. I thought we could say something like, linguistics involves the analysis of language, and forensic refers to using scientific techniques to solve crimes. So forensic linguistics involves analysing people's use of language to find out whether they've committed a crime. What do you think of that as a definition?
Sounds okay. I looked it up in my dictionary and I got something similar.
Then we can add something about what forensic linguists actually do to back it up. You know, like analysing documents to find out who wrote them.
Good point. Let's do that. What about the actual project? I'm glad we chose voice identification as the topic.
Yeah, we've been given a voice recording of a possible suspect. Not a real suspect, of course. So we've got to listen to the recording and analyse their voice. Should be okay?
Well, I've already listened to the recording, and I can't even tell if it's a man or a woman. But I guess that doesn't matter. The accent's a local one, though I'm not sure how that will affect anything. Where we're really going to get in trouble is that the recording is very unclear. I'm sure they've done that to test us.
Well, they weren't going to make it easy. We have to analyse the voice sample with that spectrograph instrument, don't we? Learning what to do with it is the only thing that really concerns me about this project.
It'll be fine.
I guess so. And then we have to interview the suspect and make our own recording face-to-face and decide if it's the same person as on the original recording, right?
Yes. It's not an exact science, but it's usually pretty accurate. You can often tell, even when they've got a cold, it's the same person, but they might do something like speaking with another accent because the tutor suggests they do that just to test us.
So let's get on with it then. Oh, and don't start your usual self-doubt about whether you can do the work or not. You usually do okay in the end. I reckon that as long as we focus on the main points of the assignment, we can think about the finer details later. My problem is creating things to worry about before I've even started.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30 on page 6. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
We'll have to do some background reading first. I'll go to the library later and get what we need.
Okay. I've already looked at forensics today, and it didn't say much about voice identification, so we needn't bother with that one. Language and crime looks a bit more promising, doesn't it? I've got that out of the library already, so we don't need to worry about borrowing that.
Research methods in forensic linguistics. I guess we ought to borrow that. And voice identification will be a useful one. I'll borrow that from our classmate, George. He won't need it for his project. But we should get out modern forensic techniques. We need all the help we can get on that subject.
Okay, that's that sorted out. Now on to the practical stuff. I'm not sure about how we're going to record the voices. I'm not too good on the technical side of things.
Me neither. We'd better work out what we're doing. At least we get more than one opportunity to speak to the person playing the suspect. I just hope whoever it is won't make the task too tricky.
I'm sure they won't be too hard on us. And as long as we do our research properly, it shouldn't be too hard to do the rest of it. I'm more worried about fitting in the writing up.
I know. We've got loads of other assignments to finish as well. Now, Rob, let's decide how we're going to split the writing between us. Are you any good at introductions? They always seem to let me down.
Okay, leave that to me. Are you okay to do the literature review then?
Maybe we should split that part. I don't mind writing the methodology section if you feel comfortable doing the discussion and conclusions.
Okay, and we can do the analysis between us as well. Great, let's get started.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4 on page 7. Section 4. You will hear a biology lecture on how living things deal with changes in their environment by entering a state called dormancy. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40 on page 7. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
We've been talking about some ways in which plants and animals deal with changes in their environment. And today we'll continue that discussion by looking at dormancy. First, we'll cover what dormancy is and why organisms become dormant. Dormancy is a state of inactivity that organisms or living things enter when they need to conserve the resources available to them and reduce their demands on their environment. Most major groups of plants and animals have some representatives that can become dormant. So what is the value of dormancy? To start with, animals that have the ability to become dormant can survive conditions which are stressful in environmental terms. For instance, when lakes, ponds, or rivers dry up, aquatic organisms that have the ability to enter dormancy can survive the drought, while others that cannot do this will die. Another advantage is that creatures that can become dormant in very inhospitable conditions, such as extreme cold, can live in a larger range of places than other organisms. And because of this, because they can live in places where other animals can't survive, when they are actually active and looking for food, the amount of competition they have to deal with from other creatures is greatly reduced. Let's move on to look at what causes dormancy. There are a number of variables, but the ones that are the most significant are changes in temperature and the amount of light organisms get. Availability of food, water, and oxygen is also very important. Now we'll explore some specific examples. Let us first look at dormancy in insects. Insects can experience a reduction in their metabolism, which is a form of dormancy called diapause. In insects, diapause is either a reaction to difficult environmental conditions or a necessary part of the life cycle, such as with butterflies or certain moths. In terms of environment, it's interesting to note that through dormancy, insects can survive when it's very cold. Another creature we'll look at is fish. Fish share the same main environmental causes for dormancy as other creatures. But as one might imagine, they are particularly sensitive to drought. Let's take the African lungfish as an example. When the water supply is low, the African lungfish burrows deep into the mud, It surrounds itself with a cocoon of slime and remains inactive. While dormant, it faces two dangers. One is the possibility of starvation, and to overcome this, it relies on fat it has stored up in its body. The other is desiccation, or drying up, which is addressed through a reduction in the production of urine. Snails are also known to become dormant. Some snails seal off their shell with a membrane of dried mucus after settling at their place of dormancy. Other snails do not have this possibility. They trust the protection of their shell. Snails that remain outside during their dormancy can usually be recognized by a rather brightly colored shell, reflecting the sunlight and so minimizing evaporation. That is why in open habitats, banded snails usually have a yellow shell. Probably the most well-known type of dormancy is hibernation, which occurs in warm-blooded creatures during the winter. We know that warm-blooded animals maintain a regular body temperature. So what's really interesting about hibernators, true hibernators that is they can actually adapt to extreme conditions by turning off their internal thermostat, so to speak, and hibernating until conditions improve. Let's examine the behavior of a true hibernator, the Arctic ground squirrel. This squirrel digs underground and builds a nest that is insulated. Once in its nest, it curls up into a ball and tucks in its arms, legs, and tail. Its body temperature mirrors the cold of its surroundings. At this point, the squirrel barely breathes and doesn't react to stimulus in a normal way. During this period of hibernation, the squirrel loses nearly 40% of its weight. The process of awakening for the Arctic ground squirrel takes about 3 hours. When this happens, there is a rapid rise in the heartbeat and circulation is affected. The area around the heart warms more quickly than the rest of the animal. And despite the strain of hibernation, within 24 hours of coming out of it, the squirrel's body processes are basically normal.
That is the end of Section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.